Adopt, don't shop. If you spend any time online in dog-related spaces, then you have no doubt heard the phrase, adopt, don't shop, which these days is more often than not thrown around in a very passive-aggressive manner to shame people out of buying dogs and cats from ethical breeders. Though many people do just want to encourage people to adopt or rescue. The core intention of the phrase and movement comes from a good place, but in my opinion, it's misguided. Hey guys, how's it going? Glad to have you here. I got a lot of comments on my doodle problem video where I go over the ethical issues surrounding breeding designer mixes, saying things like adopt, don't shop. And the only ethical option is to adopt from a shelter. And I even had some that were asking me to promote the idea of adopt, don't shop, which for the record is something I'm never gonna do. So after reading all of those comments, I decided that I needed to make an in-depth video on this topic. The phrase adopt, don't shop has become significantly more prevalent in the last 10 to 15 years. The purpose of the slogan is to try and promote adoption and rescue from shelters over buying from breeders to try and decrease shelter populations. And generally, it's actually been pretty successful. But the problem is that this is a very one-size-fits-all mentality, and it makes the assumption and promotes the false idea that adoption is right for everybody. A lot of the reasoning behind the adopt, don't shop movement is the argument that supporting breeders, even ethical ones, supports the source of all of the animals that are filling our shelters. And so you should adopt straight from a shelter instead of lining the pockets of the people who are making the animals that are going into the shelters. And while backyard breeders and puppy mills do contribute to shelter populations, ethical breeders don't, and this is a very common misconception. Ethical breeders are not the problem here. The problem here is how unregulated pet ownership and breeding is. If we don't go after the root of the problem, which is backyard breeding and puppy mills, our shelters are never going to empty. Adopt, don't shop can range from a very kind and good-hearted message to a very snobby, high and mighty mentality that rescue and adoption is good and buying from breeders is bad. At its worst, adopt, don't shop glorifies dog rescue as the only ethical option and demonizes breeders, even the ethical ones, as morally wrong. And while it is totally okay to have your own opinion and your own preference, what is not okay is spreading misinformation about ethical breeders and what is filling our shelters. Now, when we're talking about ethically bred dogs, for the most part, we are talking about ethically bred purebreds. I say for the most part because there are a few purpose-bred mixes like the poodle pointer, which are actually recognized breeds that technically are mixes. That is a whole separate category that I have not done a deep dive on, but considering they are recognized, I'm going to put them most likely into the ethical category, but don't quote me on that for now until I've done a deep dive. But for the most part, ethically bred dogs are typically purebreds. Now, I'm not going to take the time right now to get into all of the issues surrounding designer mix and mutt breeding because I already did a video on that. It's called the doodle problem. It will be up here, linked somewhere. I never know which side it is. Whichever side I pick is always wrong, but I will also link in the description. Basically, I'm talking about doodles in that video, but it can apply to any designer mixes or mutts, essentially. And by the way, when I say mutt, I'm not using that as a derogatory term. It's just the word mutt means mix. So some people got mad at me for that, but if you need context on the issues surrounding designer mix and mixed breeding, then you can check out that video. But it is important to note that purebred and well-bred are not synonyms. Okay, they do not mean the same thing. A dog can be poorly bred and still be purebred. Now, up until recently, it was believed that 25% of the dogs in shelters are purebred. But a recent set of studies done by the National Animal Interest Alliance Shelter Project have shown us that this is actually not true. The National Animal Interest Alliance Shelter Project determined that breed assessments were and are typically done by shelter workers who are not breed experts. And so if a dog comes in and it looks like a collie or it looks like it's mixed with a collie, it's labeled as a collie, even if it's not a collie or there is little to no collie in them, or if there's no collie at all. And one of the problems with previous studies that have given us numbers like that 25% are that they were counting shelter admissions and not shelter residents. And the problem with that is that purebreds typically have really, really short stays in shelters. They're typically adopted out really quickly. So in those previous studies, they would have been counted as sort of as a resident, even if it had already been adopted out. A very common misconception is that ethical breeders contribute to the overpopulation of shelters. Ethical and reputable breeders typically get lumped in with backyard breeders and puppy mills, and this is harmful to everybody involved, including the animals. Ethical breeders are some of the strongest advocates for responsible dog ownership, and they are strongly against dog abandonment. And the statistics from the NAIA's study support this. The results of their study showed that the percentage of purebred dogs in shelters was actually closer to 5.04%. A number that shelter staff believe to be much closer to reality. But it's possible that this number is even closer to 3.3% because of overrepresentation of certain breeds like Chihuahuas or Pit Bulls. The term pit bull is typically just slapped onto any dog that is short, stocky, short-coated, and brown. I cannot tell you how many people I have seen online who are like,
yeah, this is my pit bull I just adopted.
And I look at the photo and I'm like, yeah, there's probably some pit bull in there, but it's at least 70% something else. And even at that 5.04 percentage, that is still incredibly low. And that is still not the contribution of ethical breeders. Ethical breeders are incredibly dedicated to their dogs, and they are very careful about every single step of the process to ensure that their dog is going to have the best life possible. Ethical breeders invest an incredible amount of time, money, and energy into their dogs. They do their best to ensure that the pet that you signed up for is healthy and behaviorally sound while they are still caring for their breeding stock. In addition to creating high-quality dogs, there are two things that ethical breeders do to ensure that their dogs never end up in shelters. Now, that's not to say that flukes don't happen. I mean, I rarely like to deal in absolutes, but this is like 99% of the time. The first thing that pretty much all ethical breeders do is microchip their puppies. This is partially for the future owner in case the dog ever gets lost, but it is also a bit of a fail-safe. So first, let's just dispel the common misconception that a microchip is a tracking device. It is not. It's not something you can just pull up on your phone and go, oh look, they wandered into the next town over. That's not how it works. Though I do not blame anyone who thought that, because when I first got my dog, I definitely thought that. So microchips are chips that are implanted into a dog, typically when they're a puppy, that carries a unique identification number. That ID number is linked to a registration database and typically contains information about the owner, like their address, their contact information, their name. Some databases will also include information about the dog, like their breed and their color, but not all of them. Many breeders, when they have the chips implanted, will register themselves as the initial owner. This keeps the breeder's information on the registry even after the dog has been purchased. Okay, future cat coming in from the editing stage just to make a little bit of a correction here. While it is true that there are some databases for microchips that do have the breeder listed in the registry as like the initial owner, like for the chips information, what is more common is that when you buy a microchip, like it's kept like in the database like who purchased the chip. So if a dog were to get lost or end up in a shelter, they're scanned, they find the microchip, and the owner for some reason cannot be contacted, then they can look at who purchased the chip and they'll see that that's the breeder, and then they'll contact the breeder. So I just wanted to clarify that, because in my research, like it did say that some databases keep the breeder's info on file the same way they do the owners, but what is more common is just who purchased the chip is kept on file. So I just wanted to clarify that. When animals end up in shelters, one of the first things that is done is they are scanned for a microchip. Now, when a dog from an ethical breeder ends up in the shelter and they are scanned and the microchip is found, typically the owner is called, the owner is thrilled that their lost dog has been found, they come, they pick them up, and the world keeps on spinning. Other times, in situations where the owner has abandoned the dog or something else has happened, the owner can't be reached, the breeder's information is still on the chip and the breeder can be contacted and the breeder can come and pick up the dog. This means that if a dog from an ethical breeder ends up in a shelter, they are very quickly removed. And the next thing that ethical breeders do is they have buyers sign a very carefully crafted contract. Breeder contracts outline the responsibilities of both the buyer and the breeder, and they also contain any guarantees about the dog. Responsible breeder contracts include health guarantees, which covers the puppy's health status at the time of sale, and often includes guarantees against specific genetic conditions, as well as confirming that the puppy is up to date on vaccinations and their health checks. Contracts also include return policies. They outline the circumstances under which a dog can be or must be returned, whether due to health or behavioral issues or the owner's circumstances. These contracts also typically include very rigid rules surrounding breeding rights. A lot of these contracts will say that if you buy the dog can never be bred. And they do that to avoid potential irresponsible breeding. There are too many people in this world who think that because their pet is cute, they need to breed them. The amount of people who approached me about my dog asking me if I wanted to breed my dog to their dog or if I had breeding rights, I'm like, no. Also, the amount of people who wanted me to breed my dog to their dog to create doodles. No, never gonna happen. Never gonna happen. I mean, he's also snipped now, but he wasn't until he was 2, so. There is also typically a section that details no resale without consent. Contracts with ethical breeders typically prohibit reselling or gifting a dog to another party without the breeder's consent. This ensures that the breeder retains control over the dog's future. Any ethical breeder will also have a clause in their contract that states that if for any reason you wanted to or needed to surrender the dog to a shelter, that you would actually be legally obligated to return that dog to the breeder. Ethical breeders make a lifelong commitment to every single puppy that they bring into the world. Ethical breeders also work really hard to ensure that you don't have a reason to want to get rid of the dog. Potential buyers are rigorously screened to ensure that they are going to be a responsible pet owner, to make sure that this breed is even right for them, and if so, which puppy is going to be right for them. Ethical breeders match the puppy to the buyer based off of what the buyer wants and needs and what the puppy is going to need. If you're going to a breeder and they are allowing you to pick the puppy, that's a bit of a red flag. Breeders ask exactly what you're looking for in a dog, what kind of temperament you're looking for, personality, what you're wanting to do with the dog, what the purpose for the dog is going to be, and they evaluate their puppies accordingly. For a little bit of an example, when we were looking for my dog, we knew that we needed a dog who was going to like being cuddled, who wasn't going to mind a physical affection, sometimes got a little bit rough, wasn't going to be easily startled, and was going to be drawn to people when they were upset. Because I needed an emotional support dog. Originally, actually, we were looking for a psych service dog prospect. That didn't end up happening, not because of him, but because of me. I was not in a position to train him. But he is an emotional support dog. He's not a service dog. Emotional support dog, two different things, and he is trained in deep pressure therapy. The breeder evaluated the litter and she told us that the puppy with the white spot on his chest was the puppy for us. He was pretty much always looking for attention. He loved cuddling with the breeder's young grandchildren, and he pretty much just always wanted to be on somebody's lap. Our culture today glorifies rescue and adoption and puts down breeders. Many people try to make it seem like there's only one right choice, only one ethically, morally correct choice. But the idea that adopting and rescuing is better and the only morally right option is built on a fallacy. Since, as we've already established, ethical and reputable breeders do not contribute to shelter populations. And adopting alone will never solve the problem. So long as breeding is as unregulated as it is, backyard breeders and puppy mills will keep running and the shelters and rescues will never empty. One argument that people often make is that someone buying from a breeder takes away one potential home for a shelter dog, when in reality that buyer was probably never going to consider a shelter dog anyways. For some people, it's just not an option, or it's just not the right option. I know for me, for my specific needs, needing a dog that wasn't going to shed because of my allergies, needing a dog that was going to, at the time, be a service dog potentially, or emotional support dog, it was either a breeder or nothing. And that doesn't mean that I'm against shelter dogs or that I don't like them. I do. I have met so many that I love. And it doesn't mean that I won't adopt one day in the future. I might. It's just not the right option for me right now. And that's okay. One thing that a lot of adopt-don't shoppers refuse to acknowledge or potentially don't even believe is that the equality in dogs between ethically bred dogs and shelter dogs is just different. And I'm not trying to offend your dog or anyone else's dog. There are good dogs in shelters. But the reality is that shelter dogs, particularly poorly bred mixes, do have a higher chance of health, behavioral, and temperament problems. It's really important that we take into account where our shelter dogs are coming from. According to the NCPPSP studies, 30.8% of people giving up their dog acquired it from a friend, and 22.5% got it from a shelter, which says that at least 22.5% of shelter dogs are shelter returns. Further down the list, 10.6% came from a breeder, 10.4% came from a stranger, 9.3% were strays, and 4% came from pet shops. Now, this study did not differentiate between backyard breeders, puppy mills, or ethical breeders, so they're all lumped into that same percentage. A dog adopted from a shelter is more than 2 times more likely to end up back in a shelter than an ethically bred dog. These researchers also did some knowledge surveys on the people who were relinquishing their dogs to shelters. They were trying to see if a lack of knowledge may have contributed to the dog being surrendered. The results were honestly quite frightening and highlighted for me how important it is that people like me are making educational content about animals, because it is astonishing how many people buy or adopt a pet with little to no knowledge about that species. Over 37% didn't know a female dog can come into season twice a year. 58% believed it was true or they didn't know whether a female dog should be allowed to have 1 litter of puppies before being fixed for health reasons. And 43.2% believed it was true or they were uncertain whether when house training a puppy it was helpful to rub its nose in its mess when he soils in the house. Now, I'm not trying to be rude about those people, but if your knowledge about the species that you are buying or adopting is that limited, you should not be buying or adopting that animal. Just because you potentially have, the money to take care of it doesn't mean that you should be adopting that pet. Like, a lot of people will be like,
Oh, I'm gonna go get this dog from a shelter. I'm gonna, save its life, bring it home with me.
if you cannot provide it an adequate life because you have no knowledge about it, there was no point in you adopting it, or little to no point. The study concluded that the knowledge deficits of people relinquishing dogs might have contributed to unrealistic expectations and inappropriate actions by owners in an attempt to solve a problematic behavior. Some of the common reasons why dogs were surrendered are as follows: moving, 7%, landlord not allowing a pet, 6%, too many animals in the household, 4%, costs of pet maintenance, 5%. You should have researched prior to determine how much your pet was going to cost. The owner having personal problems, 4%, inadequate facilities, 4%, no homes available for littermates, 3%, having no time for the pet, 4%. But even more common than all of those reasons listed was behavioral issues. And most of the owners in this group owned the dog for less than 3 months. Very few behavioral issues can be completely eliminated within 3 months. It's important to recognize one thing about this data. 96% of the dogs represented in this study hadn't received any obedience training, and 33% had never been to a vet. When you combine these facts with the owner's lack of knowledge of canine behavior and pet care, it's honestly no surprise the dogs ended up being surrendered. The point of this video is not to dissuade you from adopting or rescuing. If you want to do it and it's right for you, go ahead and do it. The point of this video is to explain how building a healthy relationship between adopting and responsible shopping is essential for canine welfare and pairing the right dog with the right owner. There is a place for adopting and there is a place for responsible shopping. The ASPCA even has a position on acquiring dogs that includes adopting and responsible shopping. Because there are homeless animals awaiting adoption in almost every community in the nation, the ASPCA firmly believes that when people decide to bring a pet into their homes, they should first consider adoption from a shelter or rescue group. Those who choose to purchase a pet should visit a responsible breeder. This position statement focuses primarily on dogs, but certainly has some application for other species, particularly cats and rabbits. The ASPCA recognizes that there is a demand for purposely bred dogs, and we know that there are dog breeders who share our vision for humane communities in which all animals are treated with respect and kindness. These breeders reject the practices of commercial breeders, brokers, pet stores, auctions, and others who profit from cruelty and instead plan breeding carefully, place dogs thoughtfully, and take a lifetime responsibility for the animals they have bred and for all of their offspring. When you do your research, there is nothing wrong with buying from an ethical breeder. What's most important is that you make the right decision for you and your family. Having the opinion that adopting is better and that more people should adopt is totally okay. What's not okay is shaming people and telling them that they're a bad person for wanting a guarantee on the pet they're bringing home. Promoting the idea that everyone needs to follow Adopt Don't Shop is not only incorrect, but it's harmful. We already took a look at that statistic that 22.5% of dogs in American shelters are shelter returns. That's proof that a significant portion of people who tried adopting a dog from a shelter ended up with something they didn't want, whether that was because of something specific to the dog or for a personal reason. In a responsible breeder situation, that dog would have been returned to the breeder and it never would have made it to a shelter. Pushing people into adopting when it might not be the right option for them pushes them into getting a dog that they may not be equipped to handle. That is not only unfair to the person, but to the dog who has to go through the process of thinking they found a home only to be returned to the shelter again. That is a traumatic experience for any living thing. Worst case scenario, you risk the person harming the dog because the dog had a behavioral issue that the person did not know how to handle. And having a pet that you don't know how to help and that you don't know how to train makes you feel helpless. It makes you feel horrible because all you want to do is to help them, to make them better. I went through this with my horse actually. I thought I had bought a bomb-proof started horse who just needed a tune-up on a few things, and when I moved her to our current property, she exploded. I actually spent a good several months pondering whether or not I needed to sell her, not because I didn't want her, but because she was terrified of everything. She was anxious all the time. Everything scared her. She was constantly on edge, and I didn't know how to help her. I was freshly 18, so I was still, a child, and I had never worked with or trained a horse like her before or anything similar to what she was going through. I'd never dealt with anything like that, and I did not have any people at my new place yet who could help me. I didn't have connections. I didn't know what to do. I felt completely helpless. Through the process of getting her to where she is now, I was injured several times. I was dragged, I was stepped on, I was knocked to the ground. My mental health deteriorated over the course of years. My horse's mental health fell apart. Her physical health got put on the back burner in many ways because we could not even, get her feet done properly because she wouldn't stand for it. And for a while, in many ways, she posed a significant safety risk to everybody around her. Now, I love my horse and I would never sell her, but I would not blame another person in my position if they had, because for a while, neither my horse nor I were happy, and we were both falling apart. Having to go through the experience of not knowing how to help an animal that I love so much, feeling completely helpless to make her feel better, was one of the worst things that I've ever mentally gone through, and I would not wish that on anybody. And it actually has, given me a lot of perspective on how my parents have felt through the years of me dealing with anxiety and depression and them feeling helpless to help me. Going through that with my horse, I got a glimpse into what that is like, and I do not wish that on anybody. Sorry, I didn't think that was going to get that emotional. This is a similar situation to what can happen with shelter adoption. Obviously, not all adoptions, but some of them. And if you get in over your head trying to do the right thing, at best it doesn't work out, and at worst, a person gets hurt and a dog gets put down. Not every person is equipped for every dog. Not every dog is right for every person. Not every breed is right for every person. Make the decision that is going to be best for you, your family, and any pet that you are going to be bringing into your family. Do your research. Ask for help. Don't get trapped into thinking that one option is morally superior to another. There is a place for both when done correctly. Adopt or shop responsibly. Okay, guys, I know that was a lot. Got a little bit emotional there, got a little bit heavy. Didn't want it to end on such a sad note, but I do honestly think that as much as Adopt Don't Shop comes from a good place, it can just be so harmful, and so I think it's important that we start recognizing that adopting is great when it's done correctly and that responsible shopping is great when it's done correctly. I think that there is a place for both, and that adopting is right for some people and shopping is right for other people, and that's okay. Adopting is not going to be right for everybody, and that's okay. And I really just hate this culture that we have online of making people feel guilty for making different decisions than us. The internet is toxic. The internet is just very toxic. I'm trying to make a nice little space here. But to change the pace a little bit, we are getting so close to 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube. By the time this video is up, we might have already hit it. So I will just take the moment now to say thank you so much to all of you who have supported me, whether you watch my videos, you like, you comment, you share, you're subscribed, anything. Thank you so much for being here. Honestly, the fact that I get to make these videos about things that I am passionate about and share them with people and they actually get views and enough views that I can actually make a little bit of an income off of this is honestly insane and honestly is kind of a dream come true, and I don't want to sound like a cliche, but it is. It is. I love it. I love making videos for you guys. I love sharing the knowledge that I have. I love going and doing research to learn new things and then share them with you. So thank you so much for everyone who has been here and continues to be here, and thank you to anyone who is joining us now. I really do just want to build a nice community here, and so on that note, I will say, of course, if you disagree with my opinion, everything I shared in this video, that is totally fine, and you can let me know. I only ask that you keep it kind, because I have had some really nasty comments coming in, and of course I know that being online, I open myself up to all of that, but I just don't think it's necessary. I think that it is way easier to have a constructive conversation and a valuable conversation if you just present your opinions in a kind way. If you disagree with me, totally happy to talk to you about that, but you don't need to call me a silly little girl or an idiot or a dumb twit. That was a new one that I got recently. Obviously, didn't make me feel great. But then I sat in the car and I blasted Jensen McCrae's Let Me Be Wrong and decided, you know what, I don't care if you call me a dumb twit, especially if you're doing it on a video that is heavily researched and scientifically proven. And I think that's more of a you problem than a me problem. But it's just not necessary. It's just not necessary. Okay, I think that is everything that I wanted to say, pretty much. If you liked this video, please leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment to let me know your thoughts. If you want to see more of my everyday life, you can follow me over on Instagram and TikTok. The links to both will be in the description. If you have a topic request, you can leave that in the comments. If you have a video you would like me to react to, you can send that to this email here. And until I see you next time, please think critically and adopt or shop responsibly.